On this episode of Internet Business Mastery, we talk about 5 tips to make taxes less painful, if it's possible. And in the quick tip, we share a simple web app for tracking your budget.
Welcome to InternetBusinessMastery.com, where you will learn to take control, make more money, and start an internet business today. Here are your hosts, Sterling and Jay.
Hey everyone, I'm Sterling.
And I'm Jay, and we're here on a mission to help you start your own internet business. You can go to freevideogift.com to check out a video that teaches you the right way to start your very own online business. All right, so Sterling, it's the starting of a new year here. We talked last episode about how to have the best year ever in 2012. Of course, it's a time of year where people are kind of planning out goals and what they want to do in the new year. I was just kind of curious to hear what does your process look like as you sit down to think about the new year? Is there a certain process that you go through to, kind of decide what it is that you want to most accomplish in the upcoming year?
Well, yeah, the thing that I do once a year, and I usually do it around this time. I mean, that's what I'm working on now, but is, looking at what happened last year, what goals I had set up, and I more call them targets, but what did I say I wanted to happen, last year, and then I basically work from there. So some of the things that maybe didn't get done, almost done, they're almost done, I'll move those over to the new year, and then I see, basically, what do I want this next year to be?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's basically that simple, although I generally go over my my goals quarterly, other than the fact that I'm working on them quite often. But I'll look at them, see what's done, what's not, maybe shift things around, maybe add something. I do it quarterly rather than just once a year. Again, most people that I know, if they even do goals at all, they'll, obviously write a few down once a year and then never look at them again, not even the next year, to see if they did any of them.
Yeah.
They just put it away and they're done. So I try and solve that by, looking at it a lot and actually working some of the, how-to or the take action points into my calendar so that I'm actually taking steps towards those goals. And then, I'm reevaluating them quarterly. How about you?
So there's that process of looking back and reviewing, which I think is definitely an important part of that. One of the things to my approach is, I guess, kind of a top-down level or a top-down approach, I guess I should say, of goals. So, I've got a mind map where I've got things written down. I guess, what people are calling the bucket list these days. So it's kind of like, here are a list of a bunch of things I would like to accomplish in my lifetime. And a certain number of those I've kind of moved into, here are some of those I'd like to do in the next 2 or 3 years. And then some of those I've slid down to here are the ones I want to do in the next year. One big lifetime goal I have is to write a book that becomes like a New York Times bestseller and really has an impact. And so, obviously, if I want to make that happen, maybe that's something that's in the next, so that's a lifetime goal. And maybe I'm like, okay, I think I can make that happen in the next 5 years. But then I also need to be thinking about, what needs to happen in the next year then to go towards that goal actually happening? Is it a matter of, I need to start writing the book, or is it I need to get some contacts and in the book industry, or do I need to save up some money in order to self-publish the book, or whatever the case may be, kind of thinking about those steps. And I guess that's kind of the backwards planning that I know we talk about sometimes as well. And then there's always a definite part of like an income goal that's in there as well. How much money do I want to make this year? And I certainly have more reasons than just money for what I do. But money is always a really good metric in the end of, how's the business growing and how am I doing in reaching my definite major purpose? Because I have found that, the more money the business is making, the more successful the business is in reaching more people and in me getting the message out there that I want to get out there. So a money goal is another critical part of that process as well. So there you go. I guess to share a few ideas, I just wanted to kind of get, because people I'm sure right now kind of thinking about their goals for the new year, maybe just talking through bits and pieces of the process that we use. So hopefully people find that helpful.
And now, the features segment.
So another thing that goes along with the New Year's, I know some people might already be thinking about wrapping up their taxes. Now, of course, Actually, in actuality, a lot of people might, at least in the US, might be putting it off till April when the filing actually is due. But you're coming to the end of the year. I know it gets me thinking about, for better or for worse, about the taxes that need to be paid, and especially when you're self-employed and need to make sure you've got enough saved up for your last big payment to the government. And so I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about taxes, which is usually kind of a stressful and even painful experience to have to think about and to write those checks and go through all the different forms and things that have to be filled out. And for new entrepreneurs, it can be kind of a confusing thing. All of a sudden, it's not as automatic of okay, taxes are taken out of my paycheck, and at the end of the year, I can use one of these, Quicken, or I guess it's not Quicken. I don't even remember, like these tax cut and tax this, and the little tax programs you buy at every office store to do your taxes. Now all of a sudden, it's a little bit more complex than that. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of our experiences over the last several years with taxes and kind of how we've handled that. Now, of course, up front, give the disclaimer that we are not tax accountants or tax lawyers. This is definitely not professional advice on taxes in the end. You definitely need to get your own professional consultation. And of course, we're in the United States, so we'll be talking to our experience in the US. However, it's pretty equivalent to a lot of countries out there, even though the lingo might be a little bit different. A lot of things are handled somewhat similarly in the various different countries, but you'll definitely want to get input from your local tax authority or your tax authority and tax professional in order to get help with what the case may be for yourself. Just to kind of go over the experience, of course, as an employee, it was pretty simple and easy to, at the end of the year, just install one of those computer programs and enter in the few things from all the tax forms that my employer sent me, and boom, it's done. And usually there was a nice return coming to me, because they always seem to take more than they're supposed to, and that was it. But as soon as I had my own business, now all of a sudden I had to think about, okay, now I have an LLC, and there's things about you have to worry about self-employment taxes, and now you've got to send in estimated payments yourself. And definitely at first, I tried to tackle it all myself. Needless to say, it got pretty stressful when, all you have to do is read any kind of a tax document for 10 seconds and already, your eyes start glazing over. And so there's, things that steps I took along the way to simplify that process. Things like, starting to hire a bookkeeper or hire an accountant, and just kind of learning along the way of some of the new tax things I need to be aware of in order to save myself on taxes. It's very easy to pay more than you're supposed to or need to. And it's definitely within your rights, and, something that you should do, I think, as a business person, is find out how to not only minimize the amount of taxes that you're paying, keep as much for yourself as you can, and then also, in order to simplify that process so it's not taking up a lot of your time and a lot of your, mental energy. So here's, maybe 5 different, again, the magic number 5 different suggestions that we've come up with to kind of help with that process of tax, and hopefully make them less painful, again, if that's possible, to make taxes less painful. And number 1 would just be to understand some of the basics. You certainly don't need to become trained in tax law and accounting and all those things. However, it does behoove you to at least start understanding a little bit more how the tax code works, especially as it relates to businesses, and what some of the different strategies and things are. And whether that's, reading some books, whether that's consulting with some tax professionals, and we've done some of both. I can remember early on reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's one of the things he said is, so successful business people and the rich, they know how taxes works, and they know how to use that to their advantage. Simple things like being able to buy things before, buy as much as you can with money before taxes, rather than buying things with money after taxes. And that definitely, inspired me to learn more. And some of it was reading Rich Dad books, because, he's got some good financial education in there. And some of it was talking with and hiring accountants and just kind of picking their brains and going, okay, what else should I be doing? What else do I need to know here? A couple things come to mind just as far as things that people might not understand when they go into business. And in the U.S., there's the Social Security taxes that you see on your pay stub that comes to you from your employer, and it's probably like 7 point something percent, and that's for putting away for retirement later, which most of us know that. What was it you were saying to me earlier, Sterling? It's like more people believe in UFOs than believe that they'll actually get Social Security payout.
Yeah, people under 35.
More people under 35 believe in UFOs than that they'll actually get Social Security payout later on.
I know. I'm quietly over here biting my tongue, to try and make this political.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just talking about it as what it is. Oh, okay.
Right.
The only thing I'll change is I'm not going to call it taxes. I'm going to call it extortion. So other than that,
right.
they're synonymous. Okay. So anyway,
yeah. So that's so normally that was taken care of by your employer. They took out that for you, and then your employer, which you may or may not know, is actually paying half of that Social Security taxes for you as well. Well, once you've got a business, the income that you make through your business, you're now 100% responsible for paying that Social Security tax. And now, there's not an employer paying half of it for you, so the full amount needs to come from you. So that's where this self-employment tax comes from. I know people, if they're kind of surprised when they find out, what, there's a self-employment tax? I'm getting taxed just for being self-employed. And it's actually, synonymous with one that you get as an employee. But now there's like a 15.3% that you need to pay on top of income taxes for, and it's to go towards that Social Security. Now, there's a bunch of strategies that you can do to minimize the amount of Social Security tax that you pay. But that's one that can surprise a lot of new entrepreneurs. And right along with that, another one that can surprise a lot of entrepreneurs is they can get to the end of the year and have, the tax authority go, oh, wait, there's all this business income you've been making all year, and we expected to get our portion of that tax. They want their taxes now. They're not going to wait till the end of the year to get that. So you're actually supposed to be making estimated payments quarterly on the income that you're making. So understanding things like that, whether through reading some books or consulting with some professionals, are important so that you don't get bitten at the end of the year with a big tax bill that maybe you didn't save up. I had a real estate investing friend who his first year as a real estate investor did quite well, but then he got to the end of the year and his tax bill, his accountant said, yeah, you've got about $30,000 in taxes here you need to pay. And he's like, what? He's like, well, you're supposed to be paying estimated on that every quarter. He's like, oh my gosh, I just bought a new boat. So, he had to sell the boat and stuff to pay the tax bill because he didn't realize how all that was going to work.
Well, and I didn't at first either. So what ended up happening for me is they also fine you. I can't remember. I think my first year was like $500 extra I had to pay for not paying quarterly. So it was one of those things that I had to learn the hard way. So, there's just, of course, a little fine if you don't, as well as, you might, if you do really well, it's going to be very painful at the end of the year. If you didn't know all along, oh, okay, well, I've been already estimating and sending in that extortion money ahead of time, so that you at least know where it is. I was just simply saving it in an account thinking that that's all I needed to do. So at least I was doing that. Now, it was almost always under until I got, what we're going to talk about later, hiring somebody to do it all so that I know what it really is. But, it was painful at first for me, above and beyond all the ethical parts of it.
Right. So, understanding the basics is important. You don't want any big surprises. And even more so, if you do understand the basics, there's a lot you can do in your favor to actually save a whole lot of money. I mean, we're not going to go into that because, again, we're not tax professionals. But, you were just telling me the other day, Sterling, there's some strategies that you're doing that are saving you to the tune of several $1,000s a year in taxes.
Oh, tens of thousands of dollars. So yeah, it's, the year before I did it, I as happily as I possibly could, joked with family and friends that I could have bought a high-end luxury car with how much I paid in taxes. And thankfully, the year after that, again, all completely legal. And another reminder that this is all purely for entertainment purposes, talking about the, extortion stuff. But, that's what happened before. And then after, building all the different entities and stuff, after getting, of course, a tax lawyer to figure all this stuff out, I was able to cut that down by quite a bit.
All right, the second tip we have for you is to buy as much as you can before taxes. Again, a lesson I learned from the Rich Dad books. He's like, the rich buy stuff before taxes and the poor buy everything after taxes. Now, again, there are legal limits to this, but understanding the things that you can buy. I mean, there's write-offs. If you have a home office, you can write off part of your home utilities and your mortgage payment or your apartment payment. Things can be written off on your taxes. So that lowers the tax, the amount of taxes you're going to have to pay at the end of the year. So if you think about it, I mean, if you're, depending on what tax bracket you're in, but, for a lot of people, let's say, they're in a 20-25% kind of tax bracket, that means when you buy something with for your business, you're buying with the money before you pay taxes on it. So you're actually saving yourself, 20, 25, 30%. And in some cases, it can get up to 40% on these things, like computers or, so a lot of times, anytime I'm buying software or computers or even a lot of my other gadgets and gear, cameras and things that I use for my business, cell phones, stuff like that, I'm making sure that I'm writing that stuff on taxes to, again, lower that tax consequence at the end of the year. So learning how to buy as much as you can before taxes is another important strategy.
Yeah. Speaking of that, at the end of the year, for 2011, it was like, okay, should I get my first Mac, laptop? Just because I'm like, I've got, it either a big portion of this goes to extortion or I get a new laptop or what is it called? A Mac AirBook, whatever it is.
Would
I rather have that or
AirBook Pro?
Whatever it is, sure. But
we're PC people, obviously.
Clearly, I was like, am I going to buy my first Mac or send away the money? So, something to consider every single year.
All right. So the third tip that we have for you is to start a business entity. So a lot of people at first, when they start a business, they're doing business as what's called a self-proprietorship. And that means that you're just doing business under your own name, under your own social security number, or whatever your identification number is in your country. And so everything's just, applying all on your one, personal tax form at the end of the year. But by starting a business entity, now your business is a separate tax entity, a separate tax body that gets taxed differently. And that can, again, talk to your tax professional. It can help in a lot of ways in saving on taxes or managing taxes in a lot more interesting ways. For instance, having a tax entity saves me a lot on Social Security tax because my wife is a partner in my LLC. She's a passive partner, so it's as if she's an investor. She's not actively working in the business. And so her portion of the income from our business isn't subject to Social Security taxes. So that saves me over 15% on the money that she's making through the business. I just breezed over that really quickly, and that's because I'm, again, not a tax professional. I'm not trying to teach anybody how to do that. But that's the kind of thing you should go and talk to an accountant or a tax lawyer about, setting those kinds of things up once you get to where you're making some regular income from your business, because there's definitely strategies that you can do to save a lot of money. And I know you've got an even more complicated setup yourself, Sterling, that saves you on taxes.
Yeah, and really what I would consider maybe the bonus tip would be, hiring a tax lawyer when you need to. Like for me, it got to the point where, some money was coming in and, I nearly fainted every year as the checks went out to the extortion every year. At that money, I was like, I could have bought a brand new car with that. I mean, that's just so insane to me that I finally went and talked to a tax lawyer. And they definitely worked with my tax accountant on designing. And I was very big on, I don't want to do risky things. I want to do everything as quote unquote legal as possible. I don't need to be sending money offshore or anything like that. I want to do it the way it's designed to be done. Again, on the rich dad, so to speak, side of things, where you're just finding what is legally possible and doing what you need to do to set up things. So all your hard-earned money is just pouring out. So yeah, I've done quite a bit, and of course you can get really, really extensive with it. But that I would more suggest that obviously once you see the business is working. So it was maybe 4 years or something of doing internet business before I started looking into that. Again, it just took a couple of those incredibly painful checks to make me go, hey, it's worth spending some money and time on figuring this out by talking to somebody that's an expert at it.
Yeah, and those accountants and lawyers can make a case. Like in your case, the lawyer said, well, look, you're going to have to pay me X amount to start these entities, but I'll show you that in the first year, you're going to save more than that amount. So it's kind of like this no-brainer thing, Yeah. Sure, I'll invest a couple thousand now to save several thousand later. I mean, that's, when it's that kind of a decision, it's like, yeah, definitely, let's do it. So that kind of brings us to our next tip, which is the fourth tip, is kind of along those lines, and that is to hire a bookkeeper. That's probably the first person I would hire, and I think a lot of people, there's a misconception of like how much that could cost. Really, when we found out how little it would cost us to have a bookkeeper, we're like, oh, absolutely. Because, I think you were spending several hours a month on keeping the books all caught up. And of course, you hate it. And I'm sure most people hate it. And then you put it off, and then it gets out of date. And then it's even more of a pain. And then you're probably missing things. And hence your taxes may or may not be correct. And you're probably not saving as much on taxes as you could. And you're opening your business up to problems by not having good books. So, having it easily has paid for itself. We just got a recommendation from a business colleague for bookkeeper. She's been working with us now for several years. She's not even in the same state as either of us. She's in Florida, but she's able to easily handle the books. Now, I think, Sterling, you might spend, maybe an hour in a month kind of just sending her some stuff?
15 minutes at the most.
15 minutes, nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can get it to the point where they can get access to your bank accounts, but like online, but you can set up permissions so they can't, obviously transfer money or write checks or send checks to themselves or anything like that.
You can just see
so
the
once
statements.
I found out that you can securely do that, that cut my time way down. At first, I was like sending her every little thing and all that stuff, and then again online, they can go look at what who the check was written to. They can actually see the check and stuff. So,
yeah.
I just send a couple of little pieces of information. It takes me, I don't know, 15 minutes, half hour on, near the end of the year and that kind of thing, or quarterly. Maybe it takes a little bit longer, but that's it.
Awesome. Now, our bookkeeper, her rate, I believe we pay her something like $45 an hour, but she probably, our monthly bill from her is maybe $90. So she's only spending a couple hours. So she's spending a couple hours doing what could take us several hours to do. So she's saving us several hours of time. So we're buying several hours of time and a lot of peace of mind, as well as just stress savings with $90. And when you're first starting out in business, it's probably one of those things where your bookkeeper could
it wasn't
just
even
spend
that much at the beginning.
Yeah, it wasn't even that much at first. In fact, I have another little side business that doesn't need to do a whole lot, and my bill from her last time was like $30. Because that's just a much simpler business. So, at first you might find out, it might be the kind of thing where maybe it is only quarterly that the bookkeeper needs to go through your books. And so then maybe it's only a $45 charge once a quarter. So we're talking $15 a month. So you might be really surprised and I'm sure there's even less expensive bookkeepers out there, but it's definitely worth looking into once you're making consistent money. Just get some recommendations and, set up some of those special passwords where they can access all the accounts. They can't do anything with the money, but they can see all the statements. You can do that with PayPal. You can do that with most bank accounts. If you don't know how, just ask their support desks how to set that up, and it will, easily make a return and just all the benefits it brings to you to have a bookkeeper. And then the last thing, of course, would be to hire an accountant. And I know a lot of people resist this because it feels like such a big expense. And you go and pay an accountant, I don't know, $300 or $400 to file your taxes. But every time I have paid, I was thinking about this as we were putting this episode together. Every time I've paid a tax professional for their help, I've always saved at least the amount of money that if not many times the amount of money that I've paid them, because they find, deductions that I missed, or not to mention just the time savings myself. Almost all the time they're finding like, oh, there's this other little thing we can do over here, and that's going to save you $1,000. So again, paying $300 to save $1,000, or even paying $300 to save $300, and then save yourself the headache, and just to have that peace of mind that it was done right. And all the little things to make sure that you don't end up with an audit because it was a mess the way the stuff that you sent in. So these are just things that, again, once you've got regular income coming in, it's important to start hiring that team. Starting with a bookkeeper would be the first one we'd recommend. But then, as soon as you can afford it, an accountant. At the end of the year, I just recently wrote a $300 check for my personal taxes. But you know what? He's on the phone anytime. I had a big question. I was making this big wrong assumption about my finances and taxes, and it was really stressing me out for about 24 hours or so. And then I finally just got on the phone with him and said, "Hey, can you explain this to me?" And he doesn't charge me for that time because that's just that one amount that I'm paying every year to him. And, in about less than 5 minutes, he said, "Oh, no, you're thinking this is this, that, and we're going to do this, and then you're all good to go." And my stress went away. It was just taken care of. And, had I not had his help, I would have spent 2 or 3 hours researching this and probably still been confused and stressed out. So it definitely pays for itself to have an accountant that you can trust. And the best way to do that is just to go and find other business colleagues and get recommendations for them. And again, often an accountant doesn't have to be necessarily in the same city or place as you either. I mean, my accountant's there in Utah, the same one you use, Sterling, and it works out just fine still. Me living in Oregon and all that, he still handles it all. So definitely a worthwhile investment, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that when I first started reading the Rich Dad books, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't want a lawyer or an accountant and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely was kind of bootstrap about it, just going, I'll do it all myself, even though I don't really like it particularly. And when I was younger, I actually did my family's taxes. Again, it's just not even my personality, but for some reason, the simplicity of numbers, I thought I liked. But I'll tell you, once I got an accountant and somebody who's, they're a CPA, they know about taxes. And, we talked through all sorts of stuff, and they're the ones that, our CPA is who suggested the certain tax lawyer that I go talk to. So it's funny because, like you said, you can just get recommendations from people rather than just completely out of the blue do it. And especially with stuff like Facebook and Twitter and stuff, you can at least get started with that, finding out who to go to. But I mean, my person showed me which times of year you should actually send in the taxes to save so you don't get audits. I mean, there's so many little things that they know and can do. It's 100% worth hiring somebody to do it. And one of the things that I do as a little side tip is I just like to see this number. But what I have our guy do is I say, I want to have at the end of the year, when you send me the bill, I want you to have a line that shows me how much it cost me throughout the year to use you, but how much it saved me with all of the entity stuff that I did and all the stuff that I do with him, to try and minimize the tax or, get it to where it really should be. And I want to see the difference. I want to see how much I've saved. And like last year, it was, 5 figures is how much he was able to save. Well, and since I started doing the entity, all the different business entity stuff, it's a lot of money. And I'm just like, what do I care that I send him this tiny amount when I'm saving tens of thousands of dollars? And I mean, even at first, if all it does is break even, but I know it's correct, I know I'm not doing it wrong. And I got a couple of tips like, okay, well, we send the actual tax forms on this date. We send the money on April 15th. But do you know what I mean? They have all these little tips on how to have a less likelihood to get audited and stuff like that. If all I did was break even, or even I paid $100 or $200 out of pocket each year extra just to have that knowledge, it's completely worth it.
So here are a review of the 5 tips to make taxes less painful for you this year. Number 1 is make sure you understand the basics. Number 2, buy as much as you can before taxes. Don't forget those business deductions. Number 3, start a business entity. Number 4, hire a bookkeeper. And number 5 is hire an accountant.
It's time for the Internet Business Quick Tip.
Well, in the spirit of finances and taxes, I thought I'd share a little, this is actually for personal finances, a little online tool that I use for tracking my budget. I am a person who likes to kind of track where my money has gone and what I'm using for different things so I can plan and spend the money on the things that are most important for me. And I just think it's important to be in charge of your finances. So it was a couple years ago I went out looking. I used to use, Microsoft Money or something like that, but it was always causing problems. And then I think they might have changed or gotten rid of it or something. So I was like, I really want just something on the web so that I can access it from whatever computer, wherever. And what would be great is if my iPhone could access it as well. And I know a lot of people are big fans of, I think it's called mint.com, which is actually not my recommendation, believe it or not. But I do hear really good things about Mint. And there was one reason why I didn't end up using Mint for my personal budget. And that is that Mint, and they maybe they've changed this since, but now I'm already used to using this other budgeting thing, but they didn't have a way for you to take one transaction. So like say I went to the store to Fred Meyer or something, and I got some cash back, and so I want to be able to itemize and say, okay, half of this Fred Meyer bill was for groceries, and the other half was cash that I took out to pay my personal assistant or something. And so I want to be able to split it between two different accounts in my budget. They didn't have the ability to do that. It was kind of an all or nothing. Each transaction could only be categorized in one way. So I went searching around, and I found a service that I've now used for a couple years and works well, and it's pretty easy to do your budget, and that is buxfer.com. I'm not sure where they get their name from, buxfer.com. They do allow that splitting or itemizing of different stuff, but then I also just like that it's really easy to go in there, and it can automatically grab all the transactions from your bank account, and it even starts learning how you tag things. So if it sees that, well, every time you go to Subway, you categorize that as food or whatever, then it just learns that every time it sees Subway, a transaction for Subway, to automatically. So it gets to the point where I just pull everything in, glance over it once, maybe tag one or two things, and bam, it's done in no time at all. And then, of course, at the end of the month, I can pull up a report and kind of see, okay, did I spend more than we planned on groceries? Did I spend more than we planned? And most of my expenses are pretty kind of like fixed type things. It's always like that eating out and groceries that can come back to bite you. And you're like, oh, I ate out a few more times than we planned or whatever. So it's just my wife and I like to be able to have those reports to look at and kind of do our projections for the future using that. So I thought since we kind of had a financial episode here, I would mention buxfer.com as a quick tip for your easy online money management, which actually we use it for personal, but I imagine you could use it for business if you wanted as well.
If you'd like to get dozens of resources such as this one, you can find them in the Internet Business Mastery Academy, along with video tutorials showing you exactly how we use many of them. So to get your risk-free trial membership to the Academy, go to InternetBusinessMasteryAcademy.com.
You've been listening to the iconoclasts of the 9 to 5 Sterling and Jay. Sterling and Jay invite you to discover one of their most popular video programs ever, the Online Business Freedom Formula. Visit freevideogift.com right now to get instant access to this life-changing video series, pulled directly from the acclaimed Internet Business Mastery Academy membership community. Go now to freevideogift.com. Take control. Make more money. Start an internet business today.